Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. According to Ukraine's lead negotiator, the first day of Russia-Ukraine talks in UAE have concluded, adding that the talks will continue on Thursday as planned. US border czar Tom Homan announces the removal of 700 immigration enforcement personnel from Minnesota after weeks of operations and the fatal shooting of 2 protesters that sparked widespread outrage. Homan said the move would take effect immediately. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he deeply regrets appointing Peter Mandelson as Britain's ambassador to the United States, adding that Mandelson has betrayed the country, Parliament and the Labour Party. Russian Foreign Ministry says they hope that during the meeting between Iran and US scheduled for Friday, steps will be taken to prevent further escalation, adding that issues of removal uranium from Iran is still on the table. China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin praises their partnership in a video call on Wednesday, calling ties a stabilizing force amid global turmoil and pledging deeper cooperation ahead of the Ukraine war anniversary. The death toll after a gunman raided Woro, a remote village in Kwara State, has now risen to 162. Residents describe it as the deadliest attack in the area this year. Amid restrictions at Rafah, at least 23 Palestinians, including children, are killed in an Israeli attack across Gaza since early morning, as per reports. Beijing accuses the European Union of taking discriminatory measures after the bloc opened in an investigation into Chinese clean energy giant Goldwind over concerns the firm unfairly benefited from state subsidies. And for your top story this hour, top US border official Tom Homan said Wednesday that Trump administration will remove about 700 federal immigration enforcement personnel from Minnesota, part of a broader shift in its aggressive immigration operation in the Twin Cities. Homan, serving as the White House border czar, made the announcement in Minneapolis. Let's listen in.
Increase in unprecedented collaboration, and as a result of the need for less law enforcement officers to do this work in a safer environment, I have announced effective immediately we will draw down 700 people effective today. 700 law enforcement.
Homan framed the decision as a response to a safer operational environment that requires fewer officers on the streets. Despite the reduction, Homan insisted enforcement will continue, with remaining agents prioritising those with criminal records, public safety threats or national security concerns. He said federal officers will stay in Minnesota until the mission is complete, emphasising ongoing operations and pledging not to pull back entirely until immigration problems are addressed. We are now being joined by David K. Johnston, joining us from New York, who's an author and a journalist. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Does the partial withdrawal of immigration officers signal a meaningful de-escalation in the Trump's administration enforcement strategy, or is it more of a tactical shift in response to local cooperation and public backlash?
Very much tactics and appearances rather than substance. There will still be 2,300 ICE and customs officers in Minneapolis, which has a police department of only about 600 people. So basically 4 federal immigration agents for each police officer. There are very few people in Minneapolis who are in the country without permission. There are a total of about 139,000 immigrants in the area, as opposed to, say, Los Angeles County, where there's at least 1 million and perhaps 2 or 3 million. And many of the people that are being targeted for arrest have committed no crimes. Some of them have permission to be here, and a fair number of them are American citizens who've been grabbed by the ICE agents and Border Patrol agents who clearly have been told, you have full immunity and you have impunity. And that's absolutely true from the federal government, but that doesn't mean they cannot be, and in some cases I'm sure will be, prosecuted by state and county authorities for crimes committed in the name of law enforcement.
And how do statements like the border czar saying he won't leave Minneapolis until it's all done, he quoted, affect tensions between federal authorities and local communities?
Well, interestingly, Homan claims he has the cooperation now of local authorities. I have not seen a news account of them speaking up on this, although this just happened. But I would be surprised if what Homan said is true. And it's important to recognize that on these issues, the Trump administration has a just awful record of making things up, misstating facts, and not being at all reliable in its statements. But the purpose of this, the reason Minneapolis was picked, is partly because of the 2020 murder of George Floyd, a black man, by a Minneapolis police officer. The officer is now in prison for a very, very long time. And Trump's fury over that, and Minneapolis, of course, the state in a city in a state that did not vote for Donald Trump. And by his own account, Donald Trump is seeking retribution and revenge against any local or state jurisdiction that did not support him in the 2024 election.
And can this move be seen as a response to legal and political pressure, including lawsuits, protests and criticism over the enforcement tactics? And what does it imply for future federal-local relations on immigration issues?
Well, legal, no, but political, absolutely. There have been huge demonstrations day after day after day in the streets of Minneapolis, even in sub-zero weather, although people there have the clothing for that and are used to that kind of cold weather. The Trump administration keeps trying to say these are paid agitators came in from outside. Nonsense. These are local Minneapolis residents. They come from a culture heavily influenced by Nordic society. Lots of people, including some of my ancestors, are from or live now in that area. And they have a high level of regard for their neighbors, whether their neighbors are here legally as citizens or with permission or partial permission or no permission at all. And so the administration knows in Washington they need to tamp down the level of protests if they can. It's not going to work by force and threats, but if they can show, well, we're not going to be quite as aggressive, we're not going to have quite as many officers, it may reduce the size of the crowds of protesters. And we'll have to watch over the coming month to see what happens in terms of people turning out and whether the conduct of ICE officers is changed, if they will stop gratuitously throwing to the ground, kicking, handcuffing, spraying with pepper spray and other chemical irritants, people who are exercising their First Amendment constitutional right to protest the conduct of the government.
Thank you so much, David, but please stay with us as we will be back with you very shortly. Colombia's most powerful drug cartel, Clan de Golfo, has officially backed out from peace negotiations with the Colombian government. This decision follows a high-stakes meeting between President Gustavo Petro and Donald Trump, where the two leaders forged a new alliance aimed at crushing top criminal leaders. The cartel walked away from months-long talks, citing the new Petro-Trump pact as a violation of the spirit of Petro's Total Peace Initiative. The move signals a collapse of efforts to bring criminal groups to the negotiating table in favour of a more aggressive US-backed enforcement strategy. At the White House, the two presidents agreed to joint military and intelligence actions against Colombian criminal capos who together produced and supply much of the world's cocaine. We are now being joined again by David. Thank you so much for joining us back here. Why did the cartel walk away from peace talks after the Trump Petro agreement?
Well, you have the president of Colombia, who is on the left and Donald Trump doesn't like at all, agreeing with the U.S. they're going to go after the three cartels. And Ivan Mordisco is the head of the biggest, best funded, and largest cocaine volume cartel. So, of course, he and the other two cartel leaders are going to walk away. They're not going to take part in talks where they're being aimed, they're the targets. Now, the U.S. has spent, in the last 26 years, over $100 billion trying to stop the cocaine trade. Colombia produces about 70% of the world's cocaine, and the U.S. is by far the biggest market for that. And this $100 billion war has been such a spectacular failure that the street price of cocaine in small amounts has fallen 75% from 1980 to today, and that's before adjusting for inflation. It is just an enormous fall in price. And if you're trying to block a drug on the streets and it keeps selling in bigger volumes at lower prices, clearly your strategy has failed. But we're seeing the Trump administration say, well, we're going to pursue that strategy more. And now we have a Colombian president who is persuaded to work with us against the cartels. And we should be working against the cartels, but the strategy, the way we've done it for the last, all the way back, frankly, to the late 60s, just hasn't worked.
Yeah. And does stronger US-Colombia cooperation make peace talks with armed groups harder or easier?
Well, we'll have to see. It depends on how they conduct those. Since the end of World War II, basically, there have been far left groups who have tried to take over the Colombian government. They have popular support in some parts of the country. They have certainly harried the various administrations in Colombia for the last 75 years, but they haven't managed to take over the government. And the tensions and the unhappiness about the structure of Colombian society and its oppressive nature are not going away. So I think I'm in no position to draw a judgment about what will happen going forward, but more of the same old is unlikely to change the situation in Colombia.
Thank you so much, David K. Johnston, for joining us here today on NewsX World. The European Parliament has agreed to resume work on implementing the US trade agreement following a decision to unfreeze it. The agreement has been frozen after US President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs over Greenland's issue. However, with Trump now backing down, European lawmakers have reached a final decision to proceed with the deal. The trade agreement, signed in July, aims to remove tariffs on all industrial goods and foster closer EU-US economic ties. The European Commission is expected to quickly move forward with implementation, marking a major step in US-EU relations. I am now being joined by Matthew Verdum, who's an American journalist, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What political and economic factors have influenced European Parliament decision to resume work on the US-EU trade deal, and how might this shape transatlantic economic cooperation?
I think that a big obstacle was Donald Trump's recent threat to impose sanctions on various European countries for taking Denmark's side in the dispute over the, possible annexation by the United States of Greenland. But President Trump has backed down from that, and so now the European Union can go ahead and ratify the pending trade deal. I suspect that the Europeans are understandably wary of moving forward, given the mercurial nature of President Donald Trump. But they do want to strike the best deal for their industries and their people. I understand that earlier today, the European Parliament failed to reach an agreement on how to proceed, but they are going to move forward with a vote next month.
And does resuming work on the deal signal a broader shift in EU trade strategy towards deeper engagements with the United States? And what risks or benefits does that pose relative to other global partners like China recently?
Well, I think the European Union wants a healthy trade relationship with the United States, and obviously, cutting any kind of deal entails some risk, especially when you have President Trump changing his mind about tariffs every couple of days. He seems to change his position, and so when you're dealing with a trading partner like that, you have to be very careful to get everything in writing and get everything clearly spelled out. I think that, however, the EU's decision to move forward and try to ratify the existing, the pending trade deal, which has to do with, as I understand it, lobster, the food, and various industrial goods. I think that should be seen as an encouraging sign by the rest of the world to move forward and try to ratify any pending deals that it has with the trade deals that it has with the United States. So, no, it's probably a good thing, but people, as I said earlier, are always going to be wary of President Trump because he changes his mind on trade policy a lot, and people are a little bit wary of that.
Yeah. Don't go too far. Stay with us, as we will come back to you in just a moment. We have some breaking news now. Panama's President Jose Raul Molina has rejected a move by Hong Kong based in Hutchinson to launch international arbitration following the cancellation of its contract to operate two key ports on the Panama Canal. The dispute comes after Panama's Supreme Court ruled last week that the contract held by CK Hutchinson's subsidiary Panama Ports Company was invalid, effectively ending its long-running role in managing the ports. In response, the company confirmed it has initiated arbitration proceedings, arguing the cancellation violates its legal and commercial rights. The issue has drawn international attention after US President Donald Trump previously applied pressure on Panama to terminate the contract, warning that the United States could seek to reclaim control of the US-built waterway if Chinese-linked firms continued operating near the canal. China has accused the European Union of discriminatory practices following an investigation into Chinese wind energy giant Goldwind, calling the move unfair and politically motivated. Beijing said the probe undermines fair market competition and warned that turning trade and clean energy cooperation into a political issue could damage mutual trust. Chinese officials urged the EU to abide by international trade rules and provide a level playing field for foreign companies operating in Europe. The dispute comes at a time of growing strains between China and the European Union over market access, subsidies and industrial policy, with the energy sector emerging as a key flashpoint. Let's listen in to what China's Foreign Minister spokesman Lin Jin had to say.
我要指出的是，欧盟频繁动用单边经贸工具，对中国企业采取歧视性、限制性的措施，发出的是保护主义信号，损害的是欧盟形象，影响的是中国企业赴欧投资的信心。
We are now being joined again by Matthew Vadum. Thank you so much for joining us here back again. Is the EU protecting fair competition, or is it targeting Chinese companies like Goldwind unfairly?
You know, whenever China, communist China, complains that it is being treated unfairly, you should always take, you know, it may be true, but you should always take the accusation with a grain of salt. China has been doing this for a long time. China heavily subsidizes its own state-owned companies. With respect to the Goldwind, you know, it strikes me as a he said, she said situation. It depends where your perspective is going to be shaped by where you stand. And, you know, I doubt that the European Union would be raising these concerns about the Chinese company if they were unfounded. China does, according to international trade experts, play fast and loose with the rules, and you know, if the European Union says that it's being treated, that the company is receiving unfair advantages, then there may be something to it. You know, I'm not saying, you know, it's 100% certain that there's something to it, but I think that, you know, the accusation needs to be investigated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Kremlin announces Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to China in the first half of this year. This announcement took place after Russia and China's virtual meeting, which primarily focused on strategic partnership amid rising geopolitical tensions. During the meeting, leaders discussed the situation in Cuba, Iran, Venezuela, emphasizing their country's position in international politics. Talks related to the Asia-Pacific region and their ties with the United States were also in focus. Xi Jinping invited Vladimir Putin to pay an official visit to China, which Putin accepted with gratitude, while dates and details are yet to be decided. That is all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.